Welcome to heCast, the official podcast of HeChangedIt. As always, my name is Mike Chisholm. As always, I am excited to be here and talk with awesome guests about just where they're at and what's happening. And we talk about the world of men's mental wellness. We've said many times HeChangedIt is a place where men can go and work on themselves, or men can go and build themselves. That has not changed. That will never change. And we're really excited to see guys that have made decisions, have taken steps, actions to getting into a better place, whether it be mentally or physically, whatever that is. And we love having this podcast where we talk about these kinds of things, because talking about it many times is half the battle. We talk about it. Hopefully you think about it, and people that you or people that you know can improve their lives because of it, can ponder some things. If you haven't downloaded the HeChangedIt app, what the heck are you waiting for? Please download it from the App Store, both Google and Apple. If you haven't liked and subscribed to heCast, again, we would really appreciate if you would do that. Our HeChangedIt overlords really appreciate those analytics when people subscribe and share the podcast as well. And just keep supporting the world of work of what we're doing here. The support that we're getting back from people and the feedback we're getting from people is nothing short of astounding. We know we're on the right track with this. I get the easiest job in the whole thing. I get to host the podcast. And the cool thing about that is not just the conversations that develop on the podcast, which help me. I'm front row center. And I think this podcast helps me more than anybody else, probably, but also the friendships that I get to make. And the guy that we're going to have right now, finally returning guests are starting to come on. And this guy here, easily can use that phrase, a brother from another mother. We first met Marshall Porteous, I guess just under a year ago, or maybe just over a year ago. At the time, he was the captain of the Kelowna Chiefs junior hockey club during COVID. And we talked about that. Not only did we talk about that, we talked about some of the mental health challenges that he has had growing up. And through that conversation, through that that amazing melding that we had that day, a beautiful friendship has blossomed, and Marshall and I are really close. And just, he's one of my favorite people in the world, and I am so excited to welcome him back. And he and I can just, shoot the shit about stuff, and he can update the HeChangedIt audience as to where he's at, the heCast audience as to where he's at. So without further ado, Marshall Porteous, thank you so much for coming back here. And it feels weird to be talking to you and having a conversation with cameras and microphones now, because we just do this outside of that all the time.
No kidding, man. Thank you so much for having me back. It's a blessing and an honor to obviously come on, and to be welcomed back again is a big deal to me. So I love it.
Well, your podcast, your original podcast was is one of the more viewed and shared and listened to programs that we've had, and I love your story because there are so many guys. I'm 45 right now at the time of this broadcast. And I've got so many of my friends right now that are literally going through some of the stuff that you had to deal with when you were in your teenage years. And part of the reason for that is we as a culture now look for some of the signs of mental wellness and mental distress earlier now. We know more about it than we did before. But at the end of the day, let's just bring everybody up to speed. Yeah, you were on here because, you're the captain of a hockey team, but you also got other stuff going on. What are some of the mental difficulties that you go through right now, just to bring everybody back up to speed?
Well, yeah, like I mentioned last podcast, I'm a sufferer of obsessive compulsive disorder, and I have been pretty much all my life. I started getting treated for it around age 11.
Yep.
And started medication for it, tried numerous different kinds, kind of found my sweet spot. And that's kind of where I'm at now, just kind of functioning, trying to find my footing. And that's slowly starting to get even better than it ever has been, which is fantastic. And then on top of that, I have ADHD as well. Which I actually kind of had the trouble of having to only be diagnosed with in my second year of university.
Right.
So I went this long without having known that I had a learning disorder. And now I know that, that's one of those things that I have to cope with and deal with. And that's another, crazy thing to have to walk around with a machete and beat through the jungle to try and find the solution to. But it's one of those things that I think I'm blessed to have been able to find that out. I think a lot of people go a long time in their lives without knowing any of that about themselves. And get called lazy, get called this, that, and the other. And I think I'm very fortunate to have been able to actually put a finger on what the root problem of a lot of my issues are. So that's actually a big deal to me.
I appreciate the sum up of where things are at. I would highly recommend any of our listeners and viewers to go back and listen to Marshall's first podcast. It was incredible conversation where he talked about that stuff back then. We're going to talk about moving forward going through, because I mean, my God, in the last year that we haven't conversed with the cameras on and the microphones on, you've gone through a lot of stuff too. I mean, you finished here's the thing. I love what you said about the awareness there, because many times that awareness, there's a saying in one of the businesses that I'm involved in that talks about how a lot of people are living quiet lives of desperation. And in the version of it where my business talks about it is on the financial side of things. When people are, if they're ignorant about how money works and they're frustrated with their financial situation but they don't talk about it. That's a quiet life of desperation. They're suffering inside, but they don't tell anybody about it. And maybe they're not even quite aware of why they're suffering. I think mental wellness could also be a parallel to that. There are many people who don't even know why they're feeling the way they're feeling. They don't even identify. How important is that awareness that you talk about? Like when that ADHD, for example, which is a fairly recent revelation, how important and how much weight was lifted off your shoulders just getting that awareness?
Well, man, through high school, I used to get told, like, you're just smart enough to slack off but still get decent grades. And so like that, as a result, like until university, when the demand got to the degree that it's at, I didn't really know that I'd ever have an issue, not studying or not having crammed the night before for an exam. So when that stopped working, I think that's when I knew there was probably something going on, but I didn't know for sure. And I ended up getting a call from my psychologist who actually diagnosed me with OCD and said, hey, listen, like there's actually a lot of studies out now that support the fact that OCD and ADHD kind of go hand in hand. And I think,
really?
Yeah. And so that was why she ended up actually kind of retracing her steps and saying, I think we should probably get you checked for this as well while we're back on the conversation of OCD. And I was like, okay, sounds good. And sure enough, naturally, she's like, yeah, I think you are a sufferer of it. And I think that took a lot of weight off my shoulders, because I was like, the last few months have been really hard for me to like really feel motivated to do something, because it doesn't come as easily to me as it used to.
Right.
And like it was always easy for me because I was getting, A's and B's in high school without having to, because I was still playing hockey then too.
Sure.
But at that
and
point,
hockey was probably the focal point of
really
everything,
was.
right?
It really was, because high school everybody has it. That's one thing that like everybody's kind of got to do it. So that wasn't necessarily a massive mogul in my life, I'd imagine. I think it was more the sport itself and the social aspect of the sport itself. And so being able to put high school off was easy. Right. So once the university started to really, beat me over the head, I was like, oh wow, this is one of those moments where I'm like, okay, I'm kind of starting to struggle, feeling the water touch my earlobes, and I'm like, I should probably start to figure something out. And
at the same time, playing hockey at a high level, junior hockey is in Canada. Junior hockey it's religion to some. Some folks watch junior over the NHL because they think it's a more exciting game, and there's lots of pressure you put on yourself. You were the captain of the team. And going through, so your first 2 years of university, you were playing junior hockey at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, you think about the plates that are spinning at that point, trying to keep everything going, and then throw in the monkey wrench of COVID.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the feeling of your last year, maybe the I don't want to put words in your mouth, with the sense of blue balls that you probably had your last year of junior before you aged out. But at the end of the day, I mean, that knowledge now, because you're still playing hockey, you're playing for university, and we'll get to that in a second. Are you finding university easier now that you've had this? Like, are there shortcuts that have developed because you've gotten this diagnosis? And can you see the parallel between OCD and ADHD? Like, can you see why the two are linked up? And this is the first time I'm hearing that these two things are in common.
For sure. Well, the first thing, obviously, like, I'm definitely finding that it's helping. Like, I got prescribed Adderall, and that's been kind of the game changer for my success in the classroom and my ability to stay even more focused than ever before. Yeah, I'm still struggling, obviously. Like, it doesn't. You got
to do the work.
Doesn't duct tape all the holes, but I still have issues just staying focused or being committed or rolling out of bed in the morning, going to the 8 a.m. class here and there. But no, it's definitely like made it so that I can sit down, finish an assignment, potentially finish a second assignment, and then go to bed instead of just like, I'd rather play Xbox, or I'd rather, just go right to sleep, or I'd rather just go hang out with my girlfriend all day and not focus on school at all, which is actually nice, that I can itemize those things and be able to, put them in a bit of a hierarchy of importance, which is huge. So that definitely did help. And I think that identification was the first step in that process. And I think that's something that I'm really grateful for. And then, OCD and ADHD, they're definitely hand in hand. Like, I didn't notice it before, but like my OCD was like middle of the night, I'd be like, well, I got to clean my room. And I'd get stuck on cleaning my room to the point where I'd be like, holy shit, it's 1 a.m. I got a test tomorrow morning. I gotta, and so that's the ADHD part, where you're procrastinating because of your obsessions. And so you kind of get to the point where you're like, and then the next morning you're tired.
You're procrastinating because of your obsession. Sorry to interrupt there though, but I think that might be, is that a marker? Is that something that people should kind of look at? Like, am I in my life a procrastinator? Many of us, fall to that. Yeah. But am I procrastinating because I have some obsessions and things like that? And so that's a something to look for. Yeah.
Well, she said the statistic, not to put words in her mouth, because obviously this could be misquoted, but she, my psychologist, who told me like, upwards of about half of people with obsessive compulsive disorder have some sort of an attention deficit learning disorder. And I was very blown away by that statistic, because I was like, that's a very interesting corner to look at it with, because obviously like you're obsessing over if you're obsessing over something that doesn't necessarily take priority in what would necessarily be the standard hierarchy of importance.
Right.
That's when you can kind of be like, okay, it's probably an obsessive issue, but that's why you're procrastinating. And that's part of the ADHD, psyche, is the fact that you're putting things above other things that don't necessarily share the same importance. And so that's kind of where I started to be able to be like, okay, this is starting to make sense. This is starting to click a little bit. And so I started to be able to, focus on things, and should I take my meds properly and on time, I was able to combat those shortcomings in a really effective way. And I started to find, like, you can find it right down to the date in hockey, even, where my points started to go up. My first 2 seasons with the Chiefs, I think I had, my first 2 seasons in the KI rather.
Yep.
I only had about, I think, 7 goals across the 2 seasons.
Yep.
And my second year, I believe I had 17 or 18 goals, 30 points total, I believe, in my second year with the Chiefs. So, and that was almost to the day I started taking my Adderall for the first time.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can really see that change. And and even this year, like after graduating from junior, you can see it on the ice. Like in my first game against SFU, it's one of those things. I was like,
hat trick.
And I was like, I should probably take my Adderall today. Like, this is a whole new level of hockey. I should probably do that. And it just benefits you in such a wide range of facets. Like, you're thinking about, okay, well, school, I don't really feel super clicked in today for school. I should probably take it this morning and really get my things handled. And then you're going into a game against Simon Fraser and you're like, this is one of the better teams in this league. You should probably focus up. I don't necessarily feel myself today. I should probably, and then next thing you know, you're like, you're back to what you should be, what the level is, right? And that's kind of what I feel like that benefit of having known that I had ADHD in the first place gives you an ability to be able to identify when and where you need to pick things up, and what ways you can get help with that is like whether it's medication or talking to somebody. Like those two items have been my fruits for
both success. Talking to somebody and medication.
Because like I definitely am not just a medication guy, and I preach that to everybody who's ever spoken to me about it. They're like, should I try Prozac? Should I try citalopram? All those SSRIs that I've ever tried. And I'm like, it's worth talking to your doctor, but I'm not a doctor. And I always want to make that clear. Like with the blog space that I posted with Project Outlet, like I made it very clear from the beginning, like this is not like a professional medical service.
You're talking about your experience, and through your experience, you're wanting people to kind of examine where they're at, and find the solution that is customized for them.
Right, totally. Because I know, and that's the thing is like these medications, they are dangerous, and if they're not taken the right way. Adderall, especially, is a very, very addictive stimulant, and that's one of those things where you got to be careful. And I think talking to a doctor and finding the right solution in a medical fashion with somebody with a few letters behind their name.
Yeah.
handling that for you. I think that's the way to do it. I think going through somebody who's been through experiences to find out if it's for you is a good way to start, though. And that's why I share these stories for sure.
You went through this journey young. Your mind is still like, I mean, like, you listen to a lot of the same shit I listen to, for a fact, just by listening to Joe Rogan and some of these other places, your brain's not done developing until you're 27, 28 years old. You knew that early on. You went on that journey when you're in your teens. Yeah. Because your mind was so malleable at that point, do you think it was easier for you to make the decision to say, yeah, I want to go talk to this person than other people? Or was it even hard? Was it hard then?
I think what was helpful was the fact that my parents were so supportive of finding a solution.
Right.
Like, I can't credit them enough for the fact that they were just so open to trying to see somebody. I think even like early 2000s, which is when a lot of this kind of started coming down for me. Even then, I think there was a pretty more significant stigma than there is now around seeing somebody and talking to somebody. And so even the words like shrink still got thrown around quite often. Right. And I think that's a pretty divisive word.
Outdated term for sure. And now it's starting to become one of those terms where people get triggered by it almost.
Yeah, totally. And it's just like, I think my parents could have easily been in that realm of it. Like for the most part, my family's blue collar family. So that can all come from that direction too, where it's like, oh, you're fine. It's just a way of thinking. You can handle this on your own, whatever. And that wasn't the case. They really saw that I was in trouble, and they were like, we're going to figure this out with you.
Yeah.
And that was, and with me, I was just desperate to find a solution. I was willing to try anything. And so for me at the time, and that I would agree that this would be the case now too, seeing somebody is something that I would have had no problem doing just based on the amount of pain and distress that I was in. And I think once you get to that level, I think you're bound to say yes to just about anything if they tell you it's going to work. So
it's cool talking to you about this right now, because it is a total continuation and evolution of our first conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the thing hasn't evolved, has stayed consistent, is that message that you just said. Yeah. Even a year later, having gone through a bunch of shit that you've gone through, and we're going to talk about that right now. I want to ask you about aging out of junior, and thank goodness university came along and you got some university hockey. You can keep it in your life for a few more years for sure before you have to make any decisions about that. And I know how grateful you are. It's neat to hear how that message has stayed the same, and you've just cemented even more. Hey, listen, go talk to somebody, go, be around people who support this stuff. Have them. You had your family, you've got a pretty serious girlfriend. She understands everything that that you're going through and have gone through and potentially could go through. Yeah. If things get dark for a little while, because that happens too, right? We all have our ups and our downs. What would you say for advice for somebody who is in a relationship with some of the mental challenges that you have?
I was fortunate enough to, like, across all of my relationships, have been with somebody who's been very understanding about the situations that I've been in. It's been frustrating for every single one of them. Make no mistake. Like, it's obviously not necessarily something we're all naturally, built to deal with. And I think in a lot of ways, you can look at somebody who's sick and be like, you know what? They're probably going to sort it out on their own, or what they're going through is so irrational because I've never experienced it either myself. And I think there's a lot of that going around these days.
Right.
I think we look at a lot of other people's issues and say, it's bullshit.
Right.
Even though, we have no idea what their problems could be. Mm-hmm. You look
because
at
I haven't felt it. It's not real.
Yeah. You look at it in minority communities. You look at it in impoverished communities, in the trans community, LGBT community, and as a whole, really. Yep. I think we all look at these problems and say, you know what they're going through can't be that bad because I don't feel it. Well, there's a reason you don't feel it. And it's because, you're whatever you are, which is not them. And that's at the end of the day, that's it. And so I think in a relationship, if you're sitting there and having a conversation with somebody who's a significant other, you have to remember that they aren't going to understand what you say.
Yeah.
You want to look for somebody, though, that is willing to try. And that's the point that I'm trying to make with a lot of people who say, listen, like my current girlfriend, I've had several friends say to me, my current girlfriend, my current boyfriend is not getting it.
Right.
Not getting it. I'm just like, you know what? You've really got to make them explain. You really got to explain, like, how your brain works, why the brain works the way it does. And if you don't know that yourself, I think that's where you have to start.
Right.
I think that's the part that, like, a lot of people fail to start with, is like, okay, well, I'm just going to tell somebody I don't feel good, but they're going to be like, why don't you feel good? And you're like, I don't know. And that's the end of the conversation. Right.
Right.
So why would you even have the conversation in the first place? You got to go to somebody who understands, who helps you get well versed in your own issues.
Yeah.
And then you can start sharing your story, which is the direction I went. Like, there's no way that I'd be able to have these conversations without the help that I got at the age of 11.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no way.
Yeah.
And so, and just based on the ADHD and OCD link, like, that's not something that I would know.
Right.
So that itself is proof of the necessity to get educated in something that you're not necessarily familiar with, especially even if it's something that you deal with on a regular basis. So
I appreciate how open you are about this and able to so freely articulate this. It will help people, and it does help people who can't quite articulate it yet. And it'll create some light bulb moments for people. I know you're all about that. I want to do that hockey thing, though. We talked a little bit about aging out before in the last podcast, because you knew it was your last year.
Yeah.
We thought you were going to be going into a year where there would be at least some hockey. Your last year wasn't so much like that. You aged out. Normally when you're playing junior hockey, hundreds of fans at your home games. You're the captain of the team. What was your last year like? How did it feel? Because you didn't know you were going to be playing university hockey after necessarily. You hoped maybe, had some ideas, irons in the fire, but and the reality of what turned out was so much better than you could have even hoped for with this new team being created. But how did it feel, kind of starting the season last year, and then kind of as it progressed and you saw the writing on the wall for your COVID year, last year of hockey before you aged out of junior? How did that feel?
Well, it was really difficult because in a lot of ways you want a swan song and you want to write the book that you want to read, right? And at the end of the day, you want to be in control of all these crazy variables. You got to understand, though, like, in that moment, like, you're really heartbroken. Like, for me, man, I cried. I'm not going to lie to you. I cried almost, probably once a month during that season, just because of the fact that, like, I'm coming to the rink every day, and half the team is like, we're all pretty much aware of the situation at hand. We know they're probably not going to start playing again. We see these case numbers going up. We see the death numbers going up, and we know this is bigger than hockey. Yeah. And at the end of the day, we're just like, it sucks. It sucks. But, like, this is the way the world is. Everybody else is losing a whole lot more than just hockey right now. So we got to be able to stomach this, and hopefully in the future we get to play more. But I'm not going to lie, man, in the moment it pulled. And I was sitting there, because I remember watching every other 20-year-old who went through that program, come to their final game of the season, get handed their jersey, get to shake hands with the team, go out, play their last game, give a wave to the crowd, go home, have a few beers, and kind of celebrate the end of an era. Yeah. And that was nothing. I got none of that. It was so hard. I was trying to lead a team through a season that they knew wasn't going to happen. How many games did you play? 4, 5? 4 games. We played 4 regular season, 4 and lots of practices. Yeah, totally. It was all practices for the most part, which I am grateful for, because, to be honest, now I'm like, I would not be where I am at without those practices having played, right? So I am grateful for it now. But in the moment, it felt, especially for the 20-year-olds, it felt pretty in vain, right? Like, we were really, why are we doing this? What the hell is the point of this, right? Like, we're like, as much as it is awesome to be out with the team and to be pretending to be playing for a team, really, at the end of the day, we're really just practicing for a team. And that's hard to do. But yeah, like, we were sitting there in the dressing room, we had 2 other 20-year-olds, Jordan Waitis and Liam Drager. Yeah. And we were just like, man, this is hard. Like, because it's hard to lead boys who know there's no consequences of, not necessarily giving their all in practice, or not necessarily, everything that you'd expect out of a standard hockey season. They don't have to do. They're not fighting for it. Yeah, there's really nothing to fight for, really. At the end of the day, it's just like your development on the ice. And if you have a future in the game, that's great. And if not, being a practice player, it's no fun for anyone at the end of the day. So that was hard. And it was heartbreaking for the longest time. And then once that final practice kind of ended, man, I was in shambles emotionally. My whole identity was hockey, until today. I played hockey for 17 years. And we talked a little bit about that, our first conversation, with the identity thing and what it's going to take to move to that next chapter and self-exploration and all that. Yeah. You went through a little bit of that before hockey decided to continue, and the hockey gods smiled on you when it came to that. Oh, yeah. But you did go through that a little bit already, right? Like, yeah, absolutely. You made the decision that you were going to be a student without playing hockey, or did you make that decision throughout that? Or was pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. It came down to blows where it was like, I had offers from all over, like, different cities and different towns and different schools, different countries. I had stuff in the US as well that was kind of tugging on my shirt sleeve. So I was thinking like, what do I do here? Like I've already logged, 60 credits at UBCO.
Yep.
I'm already halfway done a poli-sci degree there.
Yep.
Do I sacrifice the majority of those credits, see how many the next university is going to let me transfer over and then start new there?
Right.
Do I want to do that? Or do I want to continue at UBCO where I've got my friends already that I've established in a city that I've lived in for 4 years,
Yep.
With a girlfriend who lives here. Like there's a lot of different things that are up in the air, right? Like you're trying to think like
these are big decisions for a 20-year-old.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is it's there's a money factor too.
Yep.
There's a lot of different issues at hand. And at the end of the day, I just kind of sat there in my room in about, I think it was May. And I was just in the middle of an internship that I was doing in Calgary for poli-sci, kind of feeling my professional career start to grow. And I'm like, maybe this is it. This is the path. And like, I think everybody ends up here. I've heard a lot of NHLers tell me and my father, who also played pretty high level junior. They used to say, we all end up in beer league. That's the end game for everybody.
We all end up in beer league.
We all end up in beer league. So, that was kind of one of those comforting things. I was like, that's so true. It's so true. So I kind of sat there. I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And then, a couple of weeks went by, it was still hurting me. And I just remember talking to my girlfriend. I'm like, you gotta understand, like all of the validation that I got until I had like a solid relationship, like between my first year when I was still in a relationship and then my single years, all of that validation came from hockey.
Yeah.
Like people cheering your name, I remember like with the Chiefs, I had, people buying my jersey.
Yeah.
Like that's a big deal to a 17, 18, 19-year-old, right? Like that's the ego that builds for you and the confidence that you get from that is
positive
massive.
and negative, right?
Both. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like there's definitely things that you grow that aren't necessarily good from things like that.
Yep.
That can definitely manifest in a negative way if you don't take care of it the right way. But like also that's the confidence of being able to like move forward in your life and shake a hand and be like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a student. For me, I could be like, oh, what do you do? I'm a student, but I also, I play on the junior team or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's cool. It's another feather in your cap to be able to say. And like, that's just for me, I just don't want to be generic. I want to be able to do something else. And again, like I said to my girlfriend, like not to say anybody who's in school is generic.
No.
But for me, it's like, this is my identity. And so to have that taken away from me makes me feel less than I was before.
Yeah.
Not like equal or level. And so that's what I said to her. And she even said to me, like, she played high level soccer her whole life. And this was her comforting moment for me was like, like I lost that without choice too. Like she blew her ACL, MCL and tore her meniscus.
Oh, she went with
did
an
one
injury.
of those. Yeah. And
yeah.
she had surgery the whole nine and told me, she's like, I had things taken from me too. And I promise you it's okay to re-identify with something else. And you're going to feel okay.
Well, you can say that to people. You can say that to people now too. You've had something taken away from
Absolutely.
you. And even though it was given back, beautifully, you didn't know that.
No. Yeah.
And the idea of it gets better.
Yeah.
And you can apply that to all sorts of different life situations, but the idea that it does get better, you're not the only one that this has happened to.
Yeah.
And there's comfort in that.
Yeah.
Because many times when we keep that shit inside, we think we're the only one. That's part of keeping it inside is we don't realize that there are others who have gone through identical situations and have come through smiling on the other side.
Absolutely. Well, and that was my moment. Like, I don't know if you ever watched the movie Goon or the second one even.
Goon? Like
absolutely. Well, the second one, Doug Glatt's sitting there and he's got a bad shoulder injury. He's had hockey stripped from him and he's he's working in finance and he's coming home to his wife and she's like, what'd you do? He's like, oh, so many files and taxes and it was so much fun. And he's like crying through it. And then he gets a call from the team and he's he kind of rehabs and starts working on his left hook instead of his right. And that was kind of my moment. I was going out and I was going to go get my COVID shot. It was my second one. I was like, time to be a functioning member of society. And I'm still working at ATCO as an intern this summer. And I'm going to go pick up Chinese food to eat. And it was the whole time. And I get a call in my car and, I answer it, and I've been getting these telemarketers all year. I don't know how my number got out, but goddamn,
we're all going through it. Man.
It's brutal.
It's brutal.
But I end up getting this call, and I'm like, you know what? I see it's a 250 number, and I'm like, So I answer it, but I go, I know it's a Kelowna number, but I'm
sure.
like, this doesn't make any sense. So I answer it, and I go, is this a telemarketer? Because I really don't have it in me today for it. And it goes, no, don't hang up. And I'm like, okay, well, I go, who is this? And he goes, this is Kevin Bathurst of the UBC Okanagan Lakers. And I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
who's that?
Yeah.
Who are the Lakers?
Yeah,
I didn't know any of this. So then he goes, are you looking to play hockey next year? And I kind of stop my car, like I pull over. And I'm
Oh
like,
my God.
yes. Where? He's like, well, UBCO and OC have a joint program this summer that we started.
So 2 universities in the same geographic location.
Exactly.
Yep.
And then as long as you're enrolled in one of them, you can play for us, and you'll play in the BCIHL against SFU, VIU, and UVic. And all
of which have established hockey programs that have been around for a long time and are high level
for a while. Yeah. And I'm just like, that was my dream. I was thinking about going to Victoria. The only problem was the credit transfer.
Yep.
And I was like, well, absolutely. And I sat there in my car and I cried for like 20 minutes. I was like, God damn, I get to delay this. I don't have to worry about this for another 3 years. Thank God.
So you can play for 3 more years?
Yeah, I can play. Well, I can play for 5 more years if I want to.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, hopefully I
might go for a master's just to stay on the team.
Might as well just, poke my toe into poli-sci masters and see how that goes. Go to grad school here. But that's the plan, is just to keep playing and to do it alongside what I've already been doing, which is trying to get an education and trying to start my professional career. But I'm just not ready for it yet, and that's just something that I've kind of come to terms with. Is that
but you were prepared to be ready for it.
Yeah,
though.
that's
you
true.
you had gotten to that place where it sucked, but we're kind of starting to wade through the work of what it took to see what's life on the other side.
Yeah,
and then the universe kind of smiled at you and said, "Okay, that's nice, but we're gonna." Yeah. Just when you think you're out, they pull you back in, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and it's just so jarring to me because I just realized for a moment, I'm like, this is what we expect of ourselves. This is something that like we as men go through. We grow up with a sport. We grow up with a pastime. Yep. And by the time we turn 20, people are like, "Hey, what are you doing now?"
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways that's where a lot of anxiety comes from, is like that pressure to get in the real world. And it definitely comes on both sides. Like it comes for women too. I just find that the pressure of athleticism for men is extremely high. And I think that like, especially in professional sports, the pressure to get there, we put those men on a pedestal. We really do. Yeah. And for good reason, obviously. Like it's such an incredible thing to watch, to watch professional sport and a professional athlete compete. But like to want to be at that level your whole life, and then by 20 finally be told, okay, this is the line. Yeah, you kind of got to hang them up now. And that was brutal for all my mental health. And that's kind of I have a new respect for men who can do that and move forward and hand it over. So,
well, I have a respect for people who can talk about it, because you bring it up that women go through this too. Of course they do. But where does this stigma about men leaving things inside and not talking about it come from? It comes from the fact that that's what we do. And one of the things that I love about you is just how, because in the wild, I'm normally this guy too. I'm pretty vulnerable most of the time. I can talk about, as long as it's kind of a safe place and nobody's trying to be predatory, I can open up and talk about this stuff. Right. But part of that is just knowing why HeChangedIt exists, is because a lot of guys can't do that. You at a remarkably young age have learned how to do that. And while you've watched your peers around you kind of suffering, going through what you just so eloquently put, the big thing is talking about it. And you did talk about it. We talked about it last year before it actually even happened. And suddenly you're realizing, okay, it's not over. I was ready for it to be over, kind of. I didn't want it to be, but if that were the case, you were going to move on, no problem. And then suddenly you get the call that it's not over. Yeah. Let's talk about junior B to university. You played in the minor leagues system, which is very similar all across the country, maybe even North America, very, very similar. And then suddenly you got moved into a university style of playing hockey and setup and all of that system. What's the difference? Is this a higher level of play? Is it a lower level of play? Is it very similar? How would you compare the two so far?
I think, it's definitely higher. Like, it's definitely the best hockey I've ever played in my life. And it's like by a mile. And I find like it's definitely like top end junior B players. Like they definitely like are very selective with who they take from junior B, if at all, some teams.
Okay.
And then for the rest of the teams, usually made up of junior A, sometimes even higher. And then
so you're getting stretched.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like it's just really remarkable to be able to play with some guys who I not necessarily would have ever been able to share the ice with at past this point. So like there's a lot of players out on this team that are just so talented, that are moving the puck so well, that are feeding me in ways that I've never really been ready for. And that's kind of where a lot of that first game, like all those clicks that I had against SFU, that's where that all came from, was just like playing with some of these guys. And I mean, the speed itself is crazy, but there's also in Canada, there's no age limit to when you begin playing university hockey. So long as you only play 5 years, you can start whenever.
Okay, so what do you got on the team now? Are you playing with 17-year-olds?
Oh, there's one or two skaters who are a 2001 age.
Okay.
And then the remainder are 2000 and plus. So there's as old as 1991 born.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
you're playing with some men out there.
Oh yeah. So that was a bit of a culture shock for sure. Was going out there, getting a puck in the corner and having to fight off a guy who's, getting ready to start his life. Right. And like I'm sitting there, I'm fighting a man off the puck. It's definitely a change of pace. So it's very, very exciting though. It definitely makes you excited about the fact that you're playing at a new level. Like it really is like rewarding in the fact that like a goal at this level feels like it's worth more, or like a win at this level feels like it's worth more. And you definitely pay for it physically. It's definitely a difficult job to have, but it's awesome. And I'm so glad to be able to say that I'm doing it. So,
man, that's really cool. How many games you play so far?
We've only played 4 preseason.
How you doing?
We went 2-2 and 1, 0-2 and 2, actually, I believe it was.
Okay.
Because we had first two, first one we took to a shootout and we lost, and the second 2 we lost in regulation, and then the last one we took to a shootout again, which was at home here, and we lost that one. So we come close a couple times, and then the other 2 was a pretty bad weekend for us. I'm not gonna lie about that, but it's definitely, I think that's part of it. Is like this is a young team of new guys who haven't played hockey in a little bit of time. It's
essentially an expansion team. It's really what it is, right?
So we're kind of getting our footing underneath and figuring out like, well, geez, this is a whole new level for all of us. So kind of starting to realize you can't take any nights off, but it's definitely exciting. It's a pretty good record to have at the beginning of the year, just through preseason. Our first regular season games are next weekend against VIU and UVic.
Yep.
And
I'm going to try and be there on the one on the 30th. I'm going to try and be there and watch it.
Please.
Yeah.
That'll be exciting. It'll be against SFU again, which has been proven to be our best games. So yeah.
Oh, that's exciting. Where are you at in the lineup? Are the lines still being juggled around? Do you know who first line, second line, third line is?
Yeah, they've been juggled around for sure. And I don't know that they're really looking to put numbers on too much. Like I have started most of the times that I've played, and I've played on the top 2 lines pretty much since the beginning of the year. But I think like with this team, with like the amount of spread talent we can have, we could just have 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D really.
Wow.
Like at the end of the
day.
You got depth. We got depth for sure. And I think that's part of having a winning roster, right? So that's exciting for sure, is to see like we got a bunch of different guys from a bunch of different leagues that are all pretty solid leagues. So it's exciting to see.
Oh man, I when you told me the news, and I mean this is where when friendship comes in, and you can celebrate something with your friends. When you told me the news about how this team was created and you were going to be on it and all that, I was just so fucking happy for you.
Man, I was excited. You're the second guy I texted about it. Like I told my parents, and then I texted Drapes, and I texted you, and that was it. Yeah,
it's so good. I'm so pleased for you. Even though I was, walking along with you as you were moving in that other direction and saying, okay, accepting things and whatnot. And now, completely different chain of events happen, and I'm really, really happy for you. How is the work, or how is the work, playing, life balance, relationship, all of that stuff? Still with COVID happening. Are you dealing with it better? Are there any tricks of the trade that you've learned, or anything that you can kind of advice that you can give to people out there?
I think a lot of it is just being able to just keep your hands and your head busy. I think that's definitely something that
don't get bored.
Yeah. Found that like the boredness is, and the boredom, I guess is the word I'm going for, is what really brings on a lot of the anxiety I find. And at least myself and many of my peers who talk to me about it, they say like, listen, this is being stagnant in my room, waiting for something to happen to me is not the way to go. It's not a healthy way to live. And I think like filling your plate to a healthy and safe point is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
And I found that like having a relationship as serious as mine, playing hockey at a level that's as serious as this, going to a university, I'm working to, those are all keys in being able to say like, I never had time to sit at home and start thinking about why I'm feeling the way that I am. I can just, keep myself in a busy schedule, do the right things, take my medication on time, talk to my psychologist, and
So you're doing the work to make sure you stay in balance. You're talking to the right people. In some cases it's medication like it is with yours. Right. Now, that being said, you also just went through a list of some pretty big spinning plates. Do you ever get overwhelmed?
Absolutely. And I think anybody would, even just with university. I think that itself is probably one of the biggest things I've ever had to deal with in my life.
I can imagine adding university to the plate of things that I do, yet you have that.
Well, yeah,
you have the plate of things that I do, plus a team, plus university.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult process. Like I have those three other things, like hockey school, like hockey jobs, and like having a relationship, are three things that you want to do. Typically, like my job, like I love to do it, and that's good. So like those three things are easy to wake up for, but it's that fourth thing, that 8 a.m. class that you have where you're like, oh goddamn, like I gotta, or then you're like, oh, I can't work on this essay all night. I really can't. I just gotta go to sleep. And that's like, that part really gets stressful. Kind of missing a deadline or two is pretty tough. Yeah. But other than that, like the anxiety there that's kind of where it starts and ends is about there. And I think like for me, as long as like you're happy and you put it into perspective about what you're doing, that there's no wrong decisions at this age and in this field, like you're really just pushing through. Like everybody else is at school, everybody else is going through the same things you are. Just keep telling yourselves those things. And like that's like something that my girlfriend's always like preached to me, is like, we are all going through it here. Yeah. Nobody at university wants to be here. She says all the time. She's like, right. At the end of the day, we are going here because we want to be elsewhere. That's right. That's the point. And I'm like, yeah, it's very, very true. And knowing that you're in it with somebody else is very important. Not to feel like you're the only one on campus who hates what they're doing. Right. Right. And that was the difference for me. For the longest time, I thought I was the only one there who hated it. So yeah. Yeah, it's very important. The one thing that I resounding the He Changed It world, our viewers, our listeners, the one thing that was constant in people's reaction to your last conversation on here was, oh my God, this young man speaks well beyond his years. And my retort to that was, he does, because he was given responsibilities and hurdles that were typically seen for people well beyond their years. He was just given them, before he even became a teenager. Yeah. But so many people have said that to me over this last year of just this, of our conversation, our original conversation. The same is obviously even more so now as you have aged, as you become even more wise, the perspective that you have has gained even another year on it. You can tell. And I just appreciate your insights very, very much. What He Changed It is trying to do. I get the easy job. I just get to host the podcast. My wife is doing all the heavy lifting, and her team and all that. Has the world, do we need it less or more? And what is it about He Changed It that you love so much? Well, for me, I think more is always better in this type of an instance. I think opening doors for people to get better is at the end of the day what we need to do. And I think we can't push anybody through them, but as long as we give them the option, I think that's where the problem lies in the first place. And I admire everything that He Changed It striving to do and has been doing for the longest time. Like that's part of the reason why I got involved at the beginning, was just through Alex, him telling me like, Ports, you got to see these guys. They are on their way to doing something huge. And I trusted it from the get-go. And obviously, like, my favorite part is like I myself tried to start a website, started a blog space, saw how difficult that was in itself. And then to see you guys start to do it and do it with such grace. And to see the way that you guys have devoted yourselves to something as important as this is just, it's invaluable to me. Like I can't even begin to explain how important this is. And it just touches me right where I wished I had been able to figure it out with everybody else. Like just what I was trying to do with my website, what I was trying to do with my blog space, to see what you guys are doing. It's just, yeah, it's incredible.
The team is going to hear that, and they're going to be so encouraged, and it's going to put wind in their sails. Cause I mean, it's tough, right? It's that developmental, you're birthing something. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so many variables still, and there's so much to do and so much that is being done at the same time. As this thing grows, I'm really excited to be able to incorporate you and I mean, I don't even want to call it your brand, but your story and your mission and your vision into He, and that's going to be happening. Like we've already, we're earmarking as that next phase goes. Marshall Porteous is going to be a big part of He Changed It. And you're going to, I know your heart for helping people, and we're going to just try and take an amplification system for your heart and just megaphone that sucker.
Awesome.
So thank you for being you. Thank you for, I mean, I know I'm not taking advantage of our friendship and talking. I know you want to do this,
Yeah, of course.
but thank you you're so fucking busy. And I just appreciate you taking time to formally sit down and talk about this stuff with me. And I'm honored to have you as my friend. I love you, man. And I just want to say thank you so much for being on here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, man. This is, as always, such a pleasure. And I appreciate every moment that I have this mic in front of me and that mic in front of me as well. So for sure.
Marshall, thank you. There they go. They are so fast. And I hate that they go so fast, but I love that they go so fast. They go so fast because they're so powerful and organic, and time gets slippery when we do this. Thank you very much for being a viewer or a listener of HeCast, the official podcast of HeChangedIt. Once again, I know I'm a broken record, but until we get to that next phase, please subscribe. Please share the podcast. Please, if you haven't downloaded HeChangedIt yet, head on over and download it. It's fun being part of something as it blows up. That is exactly where we are right now. If you want to come be part of something as it turns into a worldwide movement, HeChangedIt is where it's at. Go to HeChangedIt.com for any information. Until the next time that I populate your eye holes or your ear holes with another podcast, my name is Mike Chisholm. I am the host of HeCast, the official podcast of HeChangedIt. Go change something.